Welcome to my kitchen. Today we've got Hari Pulapaka, the author of an upcoming book called Dreaming in Spice, a Sinfully Vegetarian Odyssey.
It is part of a series, if you will. The first one was just called Dreaming in Spice, and I wrote that about 4 years ago. And ever since I wrote that one, I thought to myself, you know, I don't think I've included everything there is to include about my love for spices, so I'm sure there are going to be a few more moving forward. And here we are, 4 years later. We've got a version that's basically for vegetarians, but I can assure you that there are inspirations in there for folks with all sorts of preferences when it comes to food, as long as they like bold flavors.
Terrific. Well, tell us what we're going to prepare today.
Yeah, so today I'm making a fairly rustic and familiar dish called Bhindi Masala. Bhindi in Hindi refers to okra. We're in summer, late summer, I get it. But okra is in season right now. This is a very simple, modest dish. And I've often said that Indians make okra as well as anybody else does in the world. And when we fry okra, for example, there's no batter, which is a different show altogether. But this is Bhindi Masala. And masala, of course, as you know, refers to just a spice blend, or could be a chutney of sorts. So I start with some olive oil in the pan. And the first step is to temper some spices. So what I have here are curry leaves. They're going to splatter, you hear that. And you're going to have some mustard seeds and some cumin seeds. So this is sort of the tadka, if you will, the smattering of, the popping of what you see here. The curry leaves are delicious, and they get nutty and they get crispy. And then after about 10 seconds or so, you put in some ginger and garlic. Okay, it's the standard sort of the first step, if you will, for a lot of vegetarian dishes, and specifically Indian dishes. So ginger and garlic. And this is going fairly fast because I've got a fairly high heat, so I'm going to cut it down a bit, a little bit more oil. Next goes some onions. These are some red onions that have been thinly sliced. You see, this is a fast dish. You know, it doesn't take long because the building of the masala is not a fussy process. Okay, so the onions are in there. There's nice fond in the pan, a nice caramelization for all of you French cuisine aficionados. Turmeric, some cumin powder, some coriander powder, and then lastly, some sort of a chili powder. By chili, I mean a dedicated chili. In this case, it's sort of a cayenne pepper. You can see that, but there's a lot happening in that pan very quickly, in a matter of minutes. It smells like a typical Mughalai or tandoori dish to me right now. And that's frankly because of the curry leaves and the turmeric and the ginger and the garlic. So after the onions sort of soften just a hair, this is important in Indian cuisine. You must always bloom the spices, as they say. So putting the spices in the oil medium, the fat medium, blooms the spices. So now the star of the show, if you will, okra. That's been cut up in sort of 3/4-inch biased cuts, as much as you want. But of course, you don't want to crowd the pan, as much as the pan will take well, without being overcrowded. This seems to be just the right amount because it's one layer of okra, if you will. So now, this is ad nauseum when it comes to cooking professionally and even at home, to season in layers and in stages. So I didn't put salt at the very beginning because, in my opinion, when you add salt in the very beginning and then you're trying to saute, the salt draws out some moisture and prohibits the saute process, which of course means jumping in hot fat. So once you've got some ingredients down and there's a fond or a caramelization happening of the natural sugars, only then do you start layering with the salt, if you will. So I just have some sea salt, just a little bit. You can always add more. This is caramelizing nicely. Oh. Indians don't use that much black pepper per se, ironically, because black pepper is indigenous to India. So in southern India, where black pepper comes from, of course, there's a prolific use of black pepper. But then in the rest of India, we don't use black pepper as if it's needed to go with salt. But, I've been in this country long enough and I've been trained professionally long enough. I put some black pepper in here. Why not? Okay, there's a lot of caramelization happening. There's a lot of fond happening. Now put some moisture. It's a rather dry dish now. The okra has to have a chance to cook. The bottom of the pan has to be released from its flavor. And we deglaze with fresh ingredients that have moisture. So in this case, I'm going to use just plain fresh tomato. And tomatoes, the liquid in the tomato is going to help deglaze this pan. And then some jalapeno. I happen to use actually Indian chilies, but the flavor of green pepper or capsicum is important in this dish. So this is going to roast essentially. It's going to roast in a low braise. So it's going to roast for a little while. It's already done roasting. I now have to give a chance for the fond to release and create sort of a quick pan sauce. So this is not described in the recipe, but this is a slight adaptation based on what I'm seeing in the pan. I need to add some more moisture here. I'm going to just use plain water. This is starting to look like Bhindi masala in some of the fine Indian restaurants of the world, if you ask me. Okay, now probably the most important step. We got to taste the broth a little bit. We got to see where the seasoning level is at. I didn't measure the salt. It's a little flat. It's not well seasoned enough. So it needs a little bit more. And this is the benefit of adding salt in layers. I'm going to put a lid on it and cut the heat down to maybe a low medium and let it go for about 15 minutes or so. And the dish is basically done, barring some last minute garnishes. So I'm just going to lid on it, let it do its thing, as they say, and cut it down even more. Bhindi masala.
Gorgeous. So it doesn't look too difficult. Do you think maybe I can pull it off?
Well, there is no maybe in the Scott Joseph world. There's only do. So yes.
There's the pressure. All right, well, Chef, I've got my mise en place here. I've got all my ingredients here, so I'm going to go give this a try, and we'll meet up later, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, Chef, I've got my squeeze of lemon and my cilantro.
Look at that.
And naan right off the...
Oh my gosh, look at the color of that naan. Looks delicious. Looks beautiful.
What do you think?
Looks amazing, Chef. Better than the restaurant, guaranteed.
Well,
Have you given it? Have you tasted it?
I have, and it's spicy. I
Yes.
put a lot of spice. But I like that. I like that. And I like that your instructions say you can adjust them and taste them and play around with them. The instructions
Indeed.
are very easy to follow, and I'm looking forward to seeing the whole book, which
Awesome. Thank you.
is
Thank you for
Dreaming in
that.
Spice, the second
Dreaming.
edition.
Yes, it's the sequel, the Dreaming in Spice, the Sinfully Vegetarian Odyssey version.
Wonderful.
The first book was not a vegetarian book, but this one is exclusively vegetarian, and in fact, contains many more recipes than the first one. So I'm
Wonderful.
actually.
Hi, Pulapaka. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen. And the recipe's going to be online, so be sure to check that out and look for Hari's book when it's released. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the first step in making naan bread is to separate the dry ingredients from the wet ingredients. So for the dry ingredients, we're going to sift the all-purpose flour into a bowl and add the salt and the baking powder and hold it for a second. Meanwhile, warm the milk to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. A little bit less is okay, but not more. And you add some sugar and yeast to it and mix it up and whisk it and set it aside for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, in a different bowl, you can whisk the yogurt to a rather smooth consistency. Now at this stage, it's sort of like making pasta. You make a well in the dry ingredients, pour the yogurt mixture into the well, and then also add the milk mixture to the well, which now has the bloomed yeast in it. Now here's where, unlike pasta, you don't want to overwork this mixture. You simply use your fingertips and work the flour into the liquid until you form a smooth and sticky dough. Do not knead the dough. It's going to be a little sticky. It's going to be a somewhat sticky dough. So once everything is mixed together, you oil a larger bowl and you pour the dough into that oiled bowl. And coat the dough with vegetable oil, cover lightly with a damp towel, and set it aside for 2 hours. At this point, we're ready to make naan bread. So simply portion out about a 3-inch ball worth of dough, let it rest for about 10 minutes, and then on a well-floured surface, roll out the dough without putting too much pressure into the dough, into any shape you like. You can either bake this bread in a preheated oven that's at 550, or you can preheat a gas grill and grill the bread and bake the bread, the flatbread, the naan, for approximately 5 minutes per side in the oven.